faith is not, at least during my time, was not big within the police department. Faith can even be seen as weak. And there's a lot of peer pressure when it comes to holding up an image and having, showing no fear, having superb courage, and just what you actually, so that one part, and then the other part is what you actually see on the streets. There's a whole underworld, there's a whole dark side that you may see in the movies or in the news, but it actually impacts it. It impacts you psychologically, emotionally, and it's a drainer.
Hey guys, welcome to the Troy Gramling podcast. I am honored to have you hang out with us today. Our goal, as always, is to partner with you so that you can reach your potential, be everything that God has created you to be. And so we want to create a community. We try to create some resources, and we try to talk about things that we all deal with when it comes to our leadership, when it comes to our culture, really when it comes to life. So thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget, we do a live stream as well. We're just going to have some fun, build some community every Sunday night at 7 o'clock, as well as the teachings. You can also go to Potential Church's channel if you want to find out some of our weekend teachings. And we're coming up on a year since the book came out. And it's hard to believe. It took me 15 years or whatever to get around to actually writing a book. And now it's almost been out a year. I want to say thank you for everyone who's purchased the book. It was on one of the bestseller lists. I forget which one, not the main New York Times, but we did make one of them, and I appreciate that. I hope it's been an encouragement to you. And if you hear anything on the podcast or in any of our resources, be sure and pass it along. Share, give us a thumbs up, even ask a question or leave a comment. Today, we have a guest. And so today I have one of my colleagues, is the word they like to use, Brother Pastor Danny Fernandez. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you for having me.
It's very, very good to have you here. And we're going to talk a little bit about what you do here, but in a past life, you were an officer of the law.
I was, yeah.
So tell us what you did and where you did it.
Yeah, so thank you for having me on. I feel like I came out of the bench. I'm normally on the other side of the camera helping, and which is an honor. But I was a police officer. Early on in life, I worked for the City of Miami Police Department. I actually grew up in the City of Miami, which is, believe it or not, people think, they always get confused with Miami. They think Miami Beach, Coral Gables, Miami-Dade County, but Miami is only 32 square miles, the actual city. So I grew up in the inner city, and I always saw the cops running around. So I wanted to be an officer. And as I turned 21, literally a month later, I was hired.
Really?
And I joined the police academy. That's a while ago.
So you got hired, then you had to go to the academy?
Correct. You get hired, go through a whole process, and then once you've done the process and you're selected, you get hired. You do some onboarding, and then within a few weeks, you're in the academy. It's about a 6-month.
So are you official until you graduate from the academy?
Right. You're not official. You're an employee of the city of Miami.
So you're getting paid?
Yes, you get paid. It's like a partial pay type. It's not
your full salary.
Not your full salary. So, but you do get paid throughout the academy. It's like, gotta go to school Monday through Friday.
6 months, you say?
6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's longer than a college semester.
6 months, and from law to psychology, humanity, physical. They call it PT, physical training, defensive tactics, shooting, driving.
So, what was the most difficult class in that 6 months?
I mean, they were all different. I think the most difficult part of the whole thing was what they call the TAW. We talked about earlier, TAW.
Yes.
The TAs are the training advisors. And they're like paramilitary, so it's like drill sergeant. man, there was a couple of those guys that were just difficult. So I think dealing with them were hard, and just there's always an urgency to everything. So timely, and they give you like 5 minutes from, let's say you go to a run, you got 5 minutes to shower, put your uniform on, which is like what they call the dress blues, and be in class, and your uniform has to be in order, right? So there's a lot of stress.
Did you live there, like in a military barracks, or did you live off campus?
No, off campus. So your report, let's say you're probably like 10 to 12 hours out there. You get there, I don't know, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, depending on the schedule or physical training and all that. And you're usually out by 5 or 6. So it's an all-day thing, Monday through Friday. You're off on the weekends. And then for 6 months.
Wow. What was your favorite?
The driving range. I think I had fun. I mean, they all have their own uniqueness, whether it's gun range. Believe it or not, I don't care about the gun range, but the driving, because you do a lot of different obstacles and you get to spin the car. They have this skid pad, which I used to love, where they put water. This water is running, and then you run through this obstacle course, and you got to hit the brakes, the emergency brakes, and you have to do a 360 and then get right back on the course without missing a step.
And you were 21 at the time?
21.
So
fresh.
Were you still 21 when you were official? Or
Yeah, because I turned 21 in January, and I started in February. So literally a month after I turned 21.
So before the year was out, you were an official police officer, and you were just 21.
The end of August.
Now, being that young, I guess though the military's that young.
I have a picture. My wife sent me a picture not too long ago of me in uniform. I think right around the graduation or so.
Well, if we can find that, we'll have to put it on the YouTube channel.
I look like a baby. Clean shaven and fresh.
So did you have a partner? You graduate, you have a partner?
So you graduate the academy, you get sworn in, now you're official. There's a state exam that you have to take right before that. If you don't pass the state exam, you're not, because the state of Florida certifies you. But then the city empowers you. So you get sworn in, then you go into another 6 months of training, which is with field training officers, FTOs. So you get your first FTO month. So you have a partner, like you said, somebody who's been around for a while, seasoned, trained, and certified. So you do the 4 months of that. You do the first month with your initial training officer. Then you do another month at a different district, different shift. And then you do a third one, and you come back on your 4th month with the first guy. And he's evaluating now, okay, how you started, where you're at. And then that one recommends whether or not you're good to then go to 2 months of solo, which now you're on your own for 2 months under like weekly evaluations. And then you get released. And then you're another 6 months of probation. So you have a total of 18 months of probationary period between academy, the training, the field training, and then on the road.
Now, was that Miami, or is that all of Florida, or federal law? Or?
I'm not sure if it's all of Florida. I think every department may differ a little bit, but most of the South Florida departments are probably the same, if not the entire state. But that was specifically, I know for City of Miami, that's what we...
Now, for those 2 months where you're on your own, were you some things that you couldn't do? Like, could you chase a car? Could you... was there some things that you weren't supposed to do when you were still being trained, but you were on your solo?
No, you're on your own, so you can do anything and everything. However, you got to make sure you cross your T's, dot your I's, because they're watching you. Any mistakes, anything out of line, any departmental order violations, or they have there's a lot of different manuals, right? There's SOP, which is standard operating procedure. Then you have the DOs, which is departmental orders. You have to learn all that stuff. And then there's state law. So typically the state law is what can get you in trouble and put you in jail if you break the law as an officer. Then you have departmental orders and the SOPs, which are more restrictive in order to protect you from making a mistake that would land you in jail, I guess. But so you got to make sure you abide by all those things, especially during your probationary period because they'll fire you for whatever reason. And even though you're protected, I don't remember now if you're protected during that time by Civil Service Board, and then you have the union, which is a whole thing where you, depending on the police department, you either got the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, or the PBA, at least here in South Florida, which is something, I don't remember what that stands for. But after you're out of probationary, it's pretty hard to get fired. But I can answer any kind of calls, do anything.
So did you get to choose your shift, or how does that work?
Oh man, no. So as a rookie, you get the bottom of the bottom. So I had decent days off while I'm training because I'm with senior officers. But once you get loose, I remember my first day, I got sent to the North End. There's 3 districts, and then there's sectors within the district. So I got sent to the North End, to probably the harder part of the city. And then I got B shift, which is a middle shift, like 3 p.m. to 1 a.m., which is not too bad. Some people like midnights. I don't care about that. The morning shift, you rarely get. I remember coming in on my first day with Wednesday, Thursday, Friday off, which is not bad. We work 3 days, 4 days on, 3 days off. I remember we go to roll call, right? It's the beginning of your day. You go in, check in. They talk about bolos, be on the lookout for this, crimes, whatever. I remember going to the urinal the first day before the roll call. Some guy says, "Hey, rookie, what are your days off?" Oh. Before the roll call was over, I had been bumped to the worst you can get, which is, I think, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Same shift, but I had the worst days off you can get. So then, you seniority allows you to get better days off, and that's with time and stuff like that.
Wow. So what's the crazy, in the early days, the first few years, what's the craziest thing that happened to you as an officer, as you think back?
Oh my gosh.
Were you by yourself? Or were you with a partner in those days?
So I was by myself most of the time. In the North End, we would partner up a lot. You get permission from your sergeant, you would double up. So you become a 2-man unit. It's a lot more fun to do that. So anytime I could, I would do that. You're part of a crew. So you have anywhere from 6 to 7 officers on your shift. Same days off. Then sometimes they alternate days. So if you're off or on a Friday, you may have a new crew that's coming in, so you might overlap some other crews. But you start building relationships with those guys and girls, and I would partner up. And most of the folks there were very proactive, looking for stuff to get involved in. So I would try to partner up as much as I can because I have more fun. Yeah. If not, as a single or solo unit, you would back up these officers. So let's say an officer takes a call and you have nothing. You have no calls. You show up and swing by their calls to back them up, unofficial backups. And but I really enjoy when I had a partner.
So was it during this time period where you were on the Cops show?
It was early on, yeah. I was in the North End, and I didn't have cops riding with me. It was riding with another officer that was a little more seasoned in a different district. And if you're referring to that clip we saw not so long ago, there was a car chase, a robbery or something that happened, and it ended up coming into our district. And they crashed, I think they crashed and jumped out by the Edison High School, which is like on 62nd Street Northwest, and 995. And I ended up being part of the apprehension, and I guess I got caught on camera.
You're famous.
Famous.
Due to the graphic nature of this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Saturn 1111, here are you?
Trying to pull him over. He's been trying to avoid me for a couple blocks. Got it? Hold on. 4424.
I'm reading 24.
4424. Did we get a unit at 451?
Put in my car. 24 is only 24.
I can buy one if you like. How many?
55 or 324.
Now, when we think about officers, especially in Miami, there's lots been written about Miami officers, especially maybe a decade before the time in which you were there. But in your time, did you ever go through where some of the officers, did start making some bad decisions and didn't do things the way they were supposed to tried to take advantage of the situation. Did you have to go through any of that as far as experiencing it?
Yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of characters within the police department. There's, where there's overly, power trips or, they go over extra and above physically more than they need to with someone that needs to be arrested or that pushes back a little bit. And, there's always, the internal affairs department is always trying to keep the police department honest. And they do all kinds of different things, whether it's they set up things to see if you bait, like a bait, to see if you bite on that and fall. Over the years, thank God I didn't get to see anything where you have to become a witness to something. But throughout the years, there's incidents where the media gets a hold of it. And I remember there's an incident where there was a call, some old man was being beat up by his son really bad. And the officers got there. I was like the third or fourth officer, and we had to fight this guy all over the house. He was sweaty, bleeding, and there's a lot of physical force used. Well, he died in our hands. And I remember immediately once he collapsed, the officers, we all became first aid, so start doing CPR. And long story short, the guy passed. And the detectives that came out and all that, they took photos and took a statement early on. And within a couple of days, I guess the family got a hold of the gentleman. It's like, oh, there was nothing happening. The officers were abusive. So then this whole investigation starts about, in the news, 4 or 5 officers beat a guy to death. So you go through that tense moment where you're having to give statements or waiting and representation and what is this going to look like. And ultimately the autopsy was the thing that we were waiting for, because, the autopsy revealed what he died for, which is he was high on cocaine. The cocaine actually was so drugged up that his heart blew. Plus he's agitated. So everything was clear. None of the force used showed any like blunt trauma that caused death. But then the victim, who's an older man, like 80 something years old, was forced by his family to change his story. But there was already enough photographs and previous statement that showed the injuries that he suffered. And he was a victim. So thankful for the thorough investigation that, supports.
Because this was before cameras.
This before cameras. I mean, there was no iPhones during my time. There was barely flip phones. So recording, like now, everybody has an iPhone. Surveillance cameras everywhere. Yeah, so you don't get a lot of those, or many, other than you had an old school surveillance camera system at a commercial property most of the times at that point. Now you have cameras everywhere.
Now, did you, during this time before you became, went undercover and all that kind of stuff, did you see, when it comes to leadership, did you see good leader? Would you say was good leadership something normal, or was it rare as far as all the different levels of leadership that you experienced?
That's good. There's a lot of, depending on where you're at in the ranks, there's politically motivated stuff, depending the higher you are, chief of police, depending on who they are character-wise and their roles. There's some that are, paramilitary, very like black and white. And then there's, in retrospect, I was very young during those years, and, obviously a lot of years here now, exposed to leadership and good leadership and even development of leadership. In retrospect, there's a lot that, very few, that leaders they cared for their team. In other words, they were looking out for their best interest of their team or their crew or whatever you might think.
Was there a lot of talk of leadership and what a good leader looked like, or did, it was a title and a position and you were in charge of something and so therefore you led? But as far as thinking through what does a good leader look like and how does a good leader do this and respond to that, and was there a lot of training and talk in that area, or mostly in how to deal with the public?
Yeah, that's leadership in the police department was mainly title, positional leader. There's a lot of within the ranks, so officer levels to sergeant, lieutenant, let's say. Sergeant's right above the officer, lieutenant's above the sergeant, right? Let's say those two ranks. You know from the officers' conversation who are the good sergeants, the good leaders, or the good lieutenants, based on how they cared for or really looked out for their teams, right? And then the ones that were not popular because they were all about, this is what we're gonna do, this is how we're gonna do it. They don't care what happens to you in that process. As far as leadership development, it's very focused on liability and public view. So how to deal with the public and how to do it in such a way where it's viewed professional, it's viewed by the law, and because the public has a big voice.
Right. So now, did you, we often hear, we want to support law enforcement, they're to protect and to serve, to provide communities that we can enjoy living in. But we also hear that, there's a lot of depression in law enforcement, sometimes even suicide, alcoholism. What is it about the job, do you think, or that you experienced either in your own life or watching other folks, that makes it not just difficult, because I think the average person can see that it's difficult, life and death and all of that. Are there other things that make it so challenging for people to do and stay emotionally healthy?
Yeah, it is definitely tough. And I knew folks that took their lives, folks that lost their lives, the alcoholism, even drugs, getting addicted to drugs. I think that there's a high demand, and there is a lot of stresses, obviously, that come with the job, but there's an image, and there's a lot of peer pressure amongst the teams or the groups, and from loyalty amongst the crews to who's a rat, for example. Who's willing to bend the rules or go into the gray areas, to that mindset of being persecuted. Everybody's out to kill you. Everybody's out to take your job. Everybody's out to fire you, or to write you up. That's very common. Writing up is like getting disciplinary action, disciplined in you violate some department order. And there are stressors to where if a sergeant wants a gun for you, we can all commit a violation in traffic.
Right.
Anybody can violate a department order or some kind of standard operating procedure or whatever. So they can really pile up the paperwork. But I think that the peer pressure of being able to fit in, faith is not, at least during my time, was not big within the police department. Faith can even be seen as weak. And there's a lot of peer pressure when it comes to holding up an image and having, showing no fear, having super courage, and just what you actually. So that one part, and then the other part is what you actually see on the streets. There's a whole underworld. There's a whole dark side that you may see in the movies or in the news, but it's it actually impacts it. It impacts you psychologically, emotionally, and it's a drainer. It's a drainer. So that there's a lot of void that comes out of doing that day in, day out.
And then, just the mindset that goes with that kind of challenging profession is not known, to share those kind of feelings, because that just like, Christianity or faith can be seen as weakness. I'm sure, sitting around talking about what you're feeling could be seen in the same way. And I can see, like you were saying, the peer pressure being both the negative and the positive, in the sense of, I know as someone who was involved in athletics, one of the things that I miss the most is that team spirit of everybody going in the same battle, in the same direction, practicing, playing, winning, losing, in ministry. you have that sense of team, but there's a lot of things going on and people are going in different directions. And so while you're a team, it's not that same sense of togetherness, which I think in the military, it seems like when you listen to firefighters and officers and in professional athletics, where you still have that sense of brotherhood or sisterhood. You guys are putting your life on the line every day. So there's a sense of, I guess, brotherhood that would come with that.
100%. I mean, any of your brothers or sisters can lose their lives that night or that day. As you get into specialized units, it's even more, because like I said, on road patrol, you may work with some folks several days of the week, and then you may have a different group of guys or girls. So you still develop a good camaraderie there. But when you go into specialized units, there's even a tighter bond, because now you're doing different operations, and it's different. Specialized units meaning like undercover, or they have different types of detective. And those are the ones that you're at their houses having the barbecues when you're off days. Those are the ones that will show up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you have a family member in the hospital. And those are the ones that hug you or pick up your mom from the floor because she's fallen and you're distraught, So there's a huge sense of loyalty and camaraderie, which there's a sense of tightness. And then there's also a lot of conflict because then you're always together. So I remember times where 2 team members are like at each other and they're okay, let's take it to the mat type of, let's fight it out or whatever. And so there's that's the good side, and there's also the bad side to it too, or the negative.
You said take it to the mat. I was watching a documentary about, I think it was Andrew Jackson before he became president. And, because I used to do all these duels and they would shoot, and he was in a duel and he put on a big coat because his plan was because I guess they would miss a lot, and his plan was he'd wear this big coat, take the hit, and then take his time because he knew, the reloading those flint type guns,
right,
and then just shoot the other guy. And you read about that. They would have champagne and they have big meal, because you always had the third person who kind of set the rules, but then was in charge of the party.
Yeah.
Afterwards, I guess, if you won. But anyways, it's in the documentary, he got hit and he's just bleeding. But because he wore that big coat, it
minimized.
Yeah. But, the other guy wasn't quite as lucky. You think 2 of our founding fathers, what was it? Hamilton died, I think, Anyways, I'm totally sidetracked, but it's just amazing when you think how things have changed. Sometimes we think things are more violent now and everything's worse now, but it's not like, at least we don't go out very often. Yeah, just at 30 paces,
30 paces, turn around.
And it was just talking about all the different rules. Sometimes they would not face one another, so they'd have to agree on that.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes the third person would count down, 3, 2, 1. And then if you didn't hit each other after 3 shots, it was like you just had to stop because it's like you're just embarrassing. 'Cause you're sitting there shooting and you can't hit each other. So crazy. But things have changed a little bit. But so you served there. We got just a few minutes left, but then you went into Undercover.
Yeah.
And that just freaks me out because I'm thinking, you're undercover in the same area and, not just down the road, but in South Florida where you're also living life with a family. So it's like 2 different worlds going on. What was that like?
Yeah. So I started first with a lot of surveillance, and then I became what's called a UC or undercover, because the team is not everybody's an undercover in the sense of they're doing undercover deals of whatever that may be. So you have some undercover guys that are more tactical and they're their surveillance and they're their support. But then you take this persona on. Yeah. So in my case, I grew out my hair, I colored my hair, I grew out a beard, and I even had an identity. So I had to, if I ever came across, I never did, but if I ever came across anything or anyone with my family, I would have to hold down that identity. So it was like looking over your shoulder all the time. Now, the great thing, we're in South Florida, like you said, I lived in Broward County while I did my work in Miami. However, I mean, you get in a car, 20 minutes later, you're in Broward County.
Right.
In the mall, in the movie theater. So my head, talk about stress, my head is always looking around and then just, or somebody comes up, hey, Danny. The good thing is that my first name was the same.
So you had a moment to figure out who they were.
My last name was different. My date of birth was different. My address was different. And we had a legitimate, real ID made. And just to see where I can put the stuff, you know, who's this person. And, but it's very stressful. And I always, you know, I ran scenarios in my head. What would I do if this would have happened? And thank God nothing ever happened. But there was one time, not with my family, but I was doing a deal. And somebody recognized me from the local business. And she called me by my name, but she didn't say officer. And I hadn't been there in a couple of years, the Subways. And I went behind them, hey, how are you? And I kind of played off, and I gave her a hug. It was an older Hispanic woman. And I whispered in her ear, hey, listen, don't say nothing else. I am working undercover. And hopefully she understood it because nothing happened. But, you know, like you never know if they're going to blow your cover. I mean, for the most part, it's not a life and death. That particular one would not have been life and death. It's more about losing the case. You put a lot of investment of time and energy and surveillance and data, intelligence. So you don't want to lose the case. But there are circumstances where it could become a loss of life.
Right.
But it was also very, very stressful. It's very stressful.
I can't. I have a hard time keeping up with my own life, let alone
a different life.
Have a different life. But, you know, some people do it and they don't even get paid to do it. They just...
They're natural. They're built that way.
Yeah.
Double life.
Oh, man, that's crazy. Well, I want to appreciate your service as an officer and the impact, especially in South Florida, because that's where, of course, I live and my kids grew up, my grandkids now. And then you've been here actually in ministry now for
14 years.
That's amazing. Time goes by.
Yeah.
Very quickly. But
I'm grateful because, you know, a lot of those years, so 16 years in that world, there's a lot of lessons, a lot of things, you know, and God protected me during that time. And a lot of things experiences that helps even in ministry. As a pastor, you come across a lot of similar things, people going through pain, divorces, domestic violence, you know, anything you can think of that can be related. People that have trouble with the law. I see it different. I have a different perspective. I've been on that side and I see this side, you know? And, you know, as I think about, you know, as a law enforcement officer, it's about the law. It's black and white. You get arrested, the system will get you through it. There's no grace. There's no compassion in that type of profession. As a pastor, we can be talking to someone. This is my experience. Yeah, you know, I used to sell cocaine. I killed 2 people. Although those things are bad, and if they dealt with the law, dealt with it, they went to prison, whatever. We have a Savior, you know. We have Jesus. The grace and love and mercy there is. You know, it's a different perspective. As officers, like lock them up, put them away forever. And and it took a couple of years. Even we were talking a few weeks back. A transition, kind of changing mindset, heart. Because I think I had told you before, my heart it hardens.
Right.
You know, everybody's out to get you, and your patience, even your frustration, even anger. So your heart becomes hard towards people, and that had to break and soften up, and so that experience over the years has helped me out tremendously in ministry and being able to see. Number one, have the compassion and seeing a different perspective of people that they have second, third chances, you know, no matter what they've gone through or done, you know. Mm-hmm. So I know it's helped me and love the fact that transition happened. It was, you know, not easy.
Right.
It's not an easy transition, but it was, in retrospect, it was incredible.
Well, and it keeps you, you know, out of the bubble. You can be in a ministry bubble, you know, where all the folks that you are hanging out with are either Christ followers or they're acting like they're Christ followers. You know, they hear you're a pastor. It's like, oh, I got to change. And, you know, sometimes you can forget what is really going on in the lives of people as far as their hurt and their struggle and their challenge. And, you know, it's one thing to talk about, you know, persevering or overcoming, but when you really sometimes see how deep of a hole people are actually in and how much they have to overcome to get back to even ground, you know, that's a great reminder. Because, you know, just as you were saying, you can become hard as an officer. You can also become hard-hearted even in ministry, you know, where you get frustrated that people don't persevere or that they don't listen or that they, you know, whatever it is, and you lose. You know, I guess maybe in all that we do, the easiest thing to lose is a soft heart.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I want to appreciate you stepping in today, as you said. And I hope you guys have enjoyed just us just chatting a little bit about Pastor Danny's background and all that's involved, and be reminded that officers are people, just like every other profession and every other person, right? They have their own challenges and struggles, and you know, there's a wide range of different people with different motives, and it would be incredible if we could all have a little more patience with one another. I don't know if you've noticed it, but one of the things I've noticed, especially since COVID, is that our world has become, you know, we're wound up a little bit tighter. And emotionally, we are a little bit quicker to kind of explode on one another. And I think patience would be a great thing to express, not only to your spouse or your kids or your girlfriend or boyfriend, but maybe to the person that cuts you off unintentionally, or the person who, you know, pulls out in front of you, or whatever it is that might happen at work. Just let's have a little patience with one another. And instead of seeing that person as the enemy or competition, what if we all actually partnered together and made this place a much more peaceful place in which to do life, and especially for the next generation. That's our heart's desire. We want you to reach your potential, to be everything that God's created you to be. Like the book says, it is the undisputed. It is the unconventional. I was going to say all the unwords.
Okay, I want to help you. Make sure you didn't forget your title.
The title of my own book right here. It's the Uncontainable Power of God Within. And that is the truth. When you realize that you are unique and that every single one of us were created to do something and be something of significance, it's our hope that you will continue to pursue that. Don't forget, check out our live stream. It's every Sunday night at 7 o'clock. Pick up the book if you haven't. And if there's anything that encouraged you or you just thought was interesting or maybe even a little bit weird, pass it on to the next person. It makes a difference in the algorithm because, as we all know, the algorithm is king. It makes a difference. Give us a thumbs up and leave us a question. We'll answer it on the next episode of the Troy Gramling Podcast. God bless, and you have a great day. Wait, before you go, if you're enjoying our content, check out this interview or this one here. They're both really good. And don't forget, subscribe. It's really important. We'll see you next time.